And welcome to Patriots 4th and 2. This is Derek Haven, Steve Balestrieri, both PatsFans.com bloggers. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about all the latest Patriots news. We have a ton to discuss, what's going on in training camp, and not to mention, we have the first preseason game, which is crazy to think about a week from today. So I'm really looking forward to that. Before we start anything, as always, Steve, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Today's just another day around the sun, right?
Steve, it's been, 2 weeks or so since we did the last show? It's my life personally. It's been absolute chaos for the last month or so. Not that, I've told everybody on the show before, but I have a daughter coming in November, so it's been a lot of nursery prep, assembling cribs, I just random stuff around the house. So yeah, been dealing with that, but we do have a lot to catch up on from a Patriots standpoint. I'm excited we could do the show today. I guess we'll start off with Steve first. It's funny. I think it was 2 or 3 days ago. We're recording the show on August 1st. But 2 or 3 days ago, I think you and I were talking, and I actually had a similar conversation with Ian Loeb, who runs PatsFans.com, just kind of offline about, the Matthew Judon situation and the Devon Godchow situation. And Judon, and the Judon situation we're going to get to right after this. But Godchow got extended, and I'll give you the numbers here in a minute. But I honestly was kind of wondering where they were going to kind of draw the line of all these player extensions that they've been doing. Not that I'm opposed to any of them. Really, they have the money. They want to retain their better players, and they're trying to build something and reward their own guys and all the things that we've talked about on past episodes. But I thought that Godchow, to me, I just thought, just given the fact that they had just kind of renegotiated his deal last year, given the position he plays, I didn't really understand his leverage until the Christian Barmore news came out, which we're also going to get to here because there's a lot of things that are kind of intertwining here. And so to me, the Godchow news came in. I was a little surprised about it, but then I was like, you know what? They're really in a tough position because they don't know what Christian Barmore's timeline is with his health situation. So they gave him a 2-year extension worth up to $21 million that has 16.5 guaranteed. So pretty good money, I would say. Steve, give me your initial thoughts on the Godchow deal and kind of how it works in with everything else.
Yeah, I was speaking to Mike Diabeta, a mutual good friend of ours from Locked On Patriots yesterday, and
great pod.
On his show, and he wants to have us both on at the same time, so that ought to be.
Oh yeah, it's definitely happening soon, hopefully.
Yeah. And we need to get Mike on here as well.
Yeah.
But regardless, him and I spoke about this, and I think it was a great move for the Patriots, and I think it was a really good move for Godchow. Obviously, it wasn't the amount of money he was looking for. And obviously, it was probably a little more than the Patriots wanted to spend. But, we've talked about this several times on our show, that there's nobody the size of Godchow that can do the job that he does.
Right.
And, he was one of the best run defending tackles in the NFL. And, that came straight from Phil Yates, who knows his stuff, and did he get paid as a top guy? No, he's not even in the top 30 for tackles. But at the same time, they were able to keep a guy who's been proven to be a great run defender, which he is. I mean, they were number 1 in the league last year against the run in terms of yards per carry. I think it was 3.1 or something similar to that. So, and especially with the news of Christian Barmore, I think we have to look at this and consider that he may not play at all this year. That's what happened with David Andrews a few years ago.
Yeah, we were just talking about that with the blood clots in the lungs. And so the blood clot situation is really, it throws a couple of different, I guess, wrenches into the machine here, because it's not just about identifying them, having surgery, whatever. It throws wrenches into travel, altitude. There's a lot of different factors, and so I mean, it happened to Adrian Clem, and that's what his issue was. And so, to me, it's like one of those things where I just don't know. Like you said, I don't see how you can give a timeline. And you know, Gerard Mayo says he anticipated him being back. He didn't necessarily say back this season. I hope he meant back like as a player. He didn't. I don't know if it meant this year or like just in general. I would certainly hope for the latter. If he doesn't play this year, that would be a huge bummer. Just because he was the best player in the front seven last year, and so would Patful, and is one of the Patriots. I mean, got to be in the top 3 or 4 best players in the entire team. So to lose him would really stink. But obviously, the most important thing is him being healthy. So, best of luck to him. And so, Steve, I think that the downside of some of these player extensions that they've shelled out, and they've shelled out a lot of them. There's been a lot of guys that have gotten deals, and guys that have been here in the past that have gotten re-upped. And I think that's when the Godchow and Judon situations can arise, because the downside of it is that they're looking like, hey man, like why am I not getting a bump?
Right.
They borrowed from Peter to pay Paul. As far as Matthew Judon goes, they took money from this year and gave it to him last year, and now he's looking at his money this year, and he's like, well, it's not really where I should be slated. Godchow was just hoping to get an extension, and he had in my mind he had no leverage, like I said, until the Barmer situation. Like it was just not even a discussion. I would have been like, all right, sit out, like go ahead. But now you're kind of screwed, because if Christian can't play, now you have literally like no depth there. I still think they did sign somebody. I forget who it was. I'll pull it up in a second. But that interior, the whole front seven situation is kind of a conversation in itself, because I feel pretty good about the guys in the back end. I feel pretty good about the safeties and the corners. I'd like to see maybe one more veteran corner added. We'll talk about Jabril Peppers' extension here shortly, because I thought that was cool. But the Judon situation is tough, and I thought it was a really bad look for him, because 2 days ago he had basically a meltdown on the field. It was 2 days ago, 3 days ago? I guess Monday, right?
Yeah. That was on Tuesday. He had the longest.
Well, he came out with no pads on when the team was wearing pads.
Right.
Came out with like a red long sleeve shirt on, blue shorts, and he did his normal throwing the ball with the fans, before practice started. And then Matt Groh came down, Elliot Wolf came down. Every single beat writer who was there, I was not there. I did not see. I saw like a video clip of it. It looked like the Zapruder film. It wasn't a great angle. Every single beat writer said it. They used the word animated to describe the conversation. I will take their word for it. It's not a good look. To me, it looked like a tantrum. He came off looking very childish, in my opinion. He wouldn't sit down. Gerard Mayo said something to him. I'm not sure what. Judon was clearly upset, and he left. To me, I think Gerard came up and said something along the lines of, hey, this is a distraction. I'd like you to go work. Why don't you go work out or leave the field? I think Judon got upset because he was trying to be – I think in Judon's mind, he's trying to – I'm not saying he's wrong for this. I'm honestly not. He's at the tail end of his career. He wants to get bumped. I think his salary right now was too low. I think he's been productive, and I think that he's just holding out because it's a business, and I understand his perspective. On the other side, I also understand the team's perspective, because they gave him money in advance last year, and he only played 4 games. And so maybe they give him an incentive-laden deal. Maybe he's upset by that. I get it. He's trying to protect himself in case of injury. I can see both sides, Steve. But I just don't think he handled it the right way.
No, he let his emotions, and his frustration get the best of him there, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know what was being said. But I don't know. I mean, this is, usually this type of situation in the past was carried out behind doors, right?
And
So,
that's what Gerard Mayo said this morning. He said the training camp to start before practice started. He said they're going to handle it behind closed doors.
right.
I'm like, now? Like it wasn't handled behind closed doors yesterday. So
No, and the whole gotcha thing. I mean, think about it. On Monday, his his uh, his agent comes to practice, Drew Rosenhaus, and Drew Rosenhaus has the reputation as a very hard negotiator, but at the same time, he's had a good track record with the Patriots. You know, and I think,
he had a great relationship with Bill. I know that for a fact.
yeah, and when I looked at the whole thing, okay, he shows up on Monday. Gajiao is in uniform and he's practicing, trying to be the good dude, right? Play the good soldier, and it gets signed on Wednesday. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think you know Rosenhaus came. They made it a point of hammering something out. You know, after practice on Monday, obviously on Tuesday they agreed to something. It's signed on Wednesday. So I don't think that was a coincidence, and that's the way it should be done. And I'm not casting any disparaging stuff on Judon. I think he's a tremendous player, and he's been so good here.
I
He's
mean, I
had
think he's been. I mean, I don't know. I don't know him inside the locker room, but I mean, I know from a player I spoke with that he's a funny guy to have around. That's all I've heard. I've heard nothing good things about coaches. We've seen him, how he interacts with fans. We've seen how he speaks to the media. We've seen how he performs on the field. I mean, by all accounts, without actually being in the building myself, I mean, he does come off like a guy who does everything the right way.
right. And the one thing we haven't heard from him yet, and hopefully they'll be able to fix this before we do, is asked to be traded. So I think it's kind of clear that he wants to stay. I believe that, because he could have asked him and traded in the spring. So I think he wants to stay here. I think he likes it here. He's had great success here. I hope they get things done.
I do too.
Yeah,
I would like to see. I would like to see a 3-year extension. Probably the first. No guaranteed money in the last year because just given his age. But one of those like let's spread it out over 3 years. Give him 2 years. Just make him happy. Just make him happy for 2 years. Let's. Is he going to be a part of the next great Patriots team? No. Because the next great Patriots team is going to take another year or two, and I'm not sure how much more he has left in the tank, right? I mean, I think that they're a year or two away from actually competing. We talked about this offline yesterday. But I do think that he's worth rewarding. They have the cap space for it, and I do think his impact helps the front seven. Plus, without him, your pass rush, especially with Barmore out, is looking really rough. I mean, Judon was back at practice today. But, I mean, Gerard Mayo literally said, I don't know if Christian will be back this season. And I honestly think, just given what you and I have talked about, without knowing anything medically, just it's a total assumption. And you know what assumptions get you into, but I'm going to do it anyway. What's the point of coming back? Like, make sure he's 100% before he gets back on the field. Otherwise, just take the year off.
You don't want to risk the guy's health at this point.
No, absolutely not. It's not like this season is this has been unfortunately this has been the story for the last few years since Brady left. It's been about rebuilding, adding more speed, adding some youth, adding some some kind of, it's kind of like a recharge here a little bit. And now we want to see the young players play. I want to see Christian Gonzalez come back and build off the 4 games he had last year before he got hurt. I want to see what Marcus Jones looks like, who's been the stickiest corner in training camp by all accounts. I want to see what he looks like after missing the whole year. I want to see some of these younger guys develop. And I think that they have some opportunity here to build with some of these younger guys. And I'm looking forward to that. I want to see what Javon Baker and Jalen Polk do. What does Drake Maye look like? Because I think he'll get some time. I don't think it'll be right away, but I think at some point he will get, some time. So all these things to me, Steve, like there are a lot of, like I said, compounding issues and some interwoven, storylines here, because I do think like the Christian Barmore news affects the Devon Godchaux thing, which affects the Matthew Judon situation, and that talks about the pass rush and how everybody else falls into the front 7. And you and I are both high, especially you, on the Armon Watts thing. Like that's going to play a role even more now.
Oh, absolutely.
So like there's a lot of interwoven storylines here.
Yeah, I mean, I was of the opinion, if anyone missed that podcast, that I think Watts is going to be one of those guys that, the Patriots have traditionally been able to sign, and then, he wasn't extremely highly thought of as a free agent, but then turns out to be a really solid player. I'm not saying he's going to make all pro or anything, but I just think he's going to be one of those guys that they're going to find a niche for, and he's going to play well. Now with Barmore being out, I think the chances of that, him playing a much larger role, have definitely increased. Some of these other young guys that have been on the periphery the past few years, they're going to get a lot more looks as well. So we'll get a good idea who can really play or not. Yeah,
absolutely. I guess next, speaking of defensive players, I mean, Jabril Peppers, 3-year extension, $24 million, about $8 million a year. I don't have the guarantees in front of me. I'm sure Miguel will refresh me later when he listens back to the show. And what Miguel, by the way. But to me, Elliott Wolf is, I'm not saying it's been perfect, but it's been pretty damn good, I think, over the offseason. I've really been impressed. A lot of these deals, they're players that we all think, and hey, if this turns out to be a total bomb, the fans really have really no room to be super upset, including I'm putting myself right in this mix, because everything that he's done, re-sign Ramondre, Christian Barmore, like some of these deals, like we're talking about Jabril Peppers, like we're talking about, these are the guys that we wanted to keep. It's like, hey, we know that the team is not good right now, but we also can see the vision. And the vision, to me, like you and I have talked about, is, get a new quarterback. They did that at 3 overall. Okay, well, we got to take care of the offensive line. Sign a couple of veterans. I think we're going to go left tackle in the first round next year. We've talked about that in previous podcasts. It's kind of a story for another day, whatever. Retain some of the good players. Identify who your core is. And reward some guys. And they've done all those things. And Jabril falls in line. Versatile player, Steve. Makes big plays. Seems like a great leader. I mean, there's not a whole lot of negatives about his game, and I thought the deal was incredibly team-friendly. Again, another tip of the cap to Elliott Wolf for that. Give me your thoughts on the Peppers deal.
Oh, I loved it. I mean, you and I have both been raving about him since they signed him, and he was coming off at the time that he was signed, a serious injury, and it took him about half to 3/4 of a season before he finally started getting into that groove. And then last year, I thought, he might have been one of the Patriots' best players on defense. And that's saying a lot, because I thought the defense was really, really good. So he's, like you said, he's extremely versatile. He can play in the box. He can play deep safety. He can play that dime linebacker role. I mean, he can do a ton of different things for you. And it shows, one, he's very intelligent as a football player, right? Because he can seamlessly drop into all these different positions, knowing what the responsibilities are and those around him. And the other, this guy is so incredibly tough. He hits like a linebacker.
Yeah.
And you kind of need that guy in the secondary. You need that guy that makes players aware that if they come across the middle, there's going to be a major collision there. And I just love his leadership. I love the way he flies around the field. I thought it was a great move for them. Hopefully, he'll have another year like last year, and it's really going to help out the secondary.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, man, he had a couple hits last year that would just
you could feel him up through the television.
Yeah, and no, it gave you he almost gave like old school vibes, I say old school, like 20 years ago, back when they could hit a little harder. But I just have always loved his game, going back to his career at Michigan. His time with the Giants, I thought he really kind of evolved, and I think he's kind of fit into something. And I'm not saying he's perfect, but he can move around and do so many different things. And I'm excited to see what Mayo and Covington have in store for him for his role moving forward. And look, I do think that they're missing a little bit of like that traditional free safety, that Devin McCourty type. But I do think the fun thing about Duggar and Peppers, I think the fun thing about it is that they can be super interchangeable, and it's going to make it harder for offense to predict certain things on the back end, because either one can come up front or go deep, and they have and both of them have obviously a little bit different attributes, but they're very similar players. So to me, I just look at it and say, man, that could be a lot of fun on the back end. Let's take a quick break here, Steve, just for podcast purposes. And then when we come back, I want to bring up another player who I mentioned earlier that I just want to have a little bit more of a discussion about. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Haven, Steve Balestrieri. Again, if you guys are listening to this podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and download the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Steve, we spent a lot of time talking about the defense, and I do want to focus still on the defense for at least a minute, and then we can kind of see where we want to go. But a player I brought up a little while ago, which someone that we both liked coming out of the draft, and unfortunately missed the year last year, but has a lot of different hats he wears, is Marcus Jones. He's gotten a ton of praise. I would say, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I would say from a good majority of the beat, I would say he's gotten a lot of praise over camp, and our friends over at Patriots Unfiltered have said, that he's been terrific in coverage and really done a good job. And I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they're boots on the ground, and I trust their opinions. So you look at Marcus Jones, and obviously you have the cornerback coverage ability, and it was going to be borderline if he was going to be able to be a starting 3-corner. I mean, because he's going to be in the slot. We know he's a shorter guy, but maybe he was a guy who was your 4th or 5th corner, but he has that crazy return ability. And then his rookie year 2 years ago, he was able to be mixed in on offense, and they used him as almost like a little gadget player. And I think with the new kickoff return rules, I think his value could be really interesting on kickoff returns, just given his shiftiness. And then I think on offense, I think you can work him in. And in the secondary, we talked about the safeties, right? We know Christian Gonzalez is back. We know what Jonathan Jones can do. In a perfect world, Jonathan Jones is probably in the slot, but he's shown that he can play outside. So do you see it as Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones on the outside, Marcus Jones on the inside, and then doing some return, or where do you see Marcus Jones' role this season?
I think he's going to play in the slot, and Jonathan will be the other boundary corner.
Yep. I think Alex Austin will probably be in that 4th spot. if I had to guess.
Yeah, and we can't forget Isaiah
Bolden, who we both
Yeah,
liked.
yep, we both like Bolden, but Sean Wade has been playing well as of late.
Yep.
They have some decent depth there at cornerback. Now we both have said that we would love to see another veteran come in, like a Gilmore or somebody, like that.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I mean, that
would make me feel. That would be the cherry on top, Steve. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that would be the cherry on top if they had a veteran that you felt like you could really rely on, because you know how much I love Christian Barmore. Anyone who's listened to the show for the last year or two knows how I feel about him. But he did get hurt his first year, so we got to see him stay healthy, for the majority of the year. Jonathan Jones, I feel great about. Marcus Jones was really good his first year. Second year, he missed because of an injury. Okay, Isaiah Bolden didn't make it through the preseason without getting hurt. Sean Wade has been really up and down. It's been a roller coaster with him. I think he's shown flashes of his early tenure at Ohio State, and I think he's also kind of fallen off. So there is some good depth there, Steve, but it really walks that tightrope of depth and unreliability, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the only way you're really going to know what you have in some of these younger guys is, to get them out on the field and play them more. I like what we've seen from Alex Austin. Down the stretch last year, I thought he was pretty good. And, some of these other young guys, we'll get a good feel for them in preseason. I think we'll see a lot of them, and that's a good thing. Let's see what they can do. But, yeah, I would, like you, I would love to see a guy like Gilmore come in. And, because then you have two shutdown corners and you can really dial up some different stuff on defense if you have the corners back there that you're not worried about them.
If you had a Gilmore, to me what it would do is I know what I have in Gilmore and Jones. Okay? And I think I know what I have in Gonzalez. Okay? So you're looking at, plus Gonzalez models his game after Gilmore. I think it'd be great to just kind of have him for a year, just kind of being an understudy, so to speak. And then that forces you to have the option to do is in dime packages, bring Marcus Jones in. Because to me, he's more of a fourth or fifth guy. I love him. I absolutely love his game. I just don't know if he's a starting slot. I think it's going to be, we've talked about it before, it's going to be really difficult with his size to be a full-time starting corner. But at the same time, I think he can be a really good depth guy, and we know what his value on special teams is, and I still think it'd be fun. I hope they give him the ball on offense this year on some screens or some bubble passes or something fun, because he is explosive in the open field. We've seen it a couple of times in his short career. But to me, it would just really settle the boat. The only argument, if I'm playing devil's advocate against signing a Gilmore, would be that you give someone like Alex Austin the opportunity to continue to grow. Isaiah Bolden the ability to continue to grow. Because if Gilmore's there, those guys would just bump down. Hey Todd, what's up, man? Thanks for listening. To me, that would be the only downside, Steve, would be not knocking some of the younger guys down. Because honestly, I thought Isaiah Bolden looked really good last year. And it was a really short sample size. But I thought he looked pretty good. I thought Alex Austin played some pretty damn good ball down the stretch of last season. So I kind of want to see those guys. So as much as I can make the argument for someone like a Stephon Gilmore, I could also make the argument against it for that reason too, because it's it'd be nice to have him, but we're not winning the AFC this year, so let's let the young guys play,
Yeah.
and also the reality is too that unless you're going to pay Gilmore a good amount of money, why does he really want to sign with a team that's going to maybe win 7 or 8 games? It's I could see him wanting to sign with the contender. He's not going to be playing forever, but so I can play both sides of the street here, Steve. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and I know Gilmore had, again, tremendous success here. AFC Defensive Player of the Year.
God, he was so good.
Yeah.
We had a really good run of corners. A really good run of corners.
Through
Bill's time.
And it could be an enticement. Hey, I'm on the back end of my career. I would like to go back and maybe help them get off the ground a little bit, right? Back to where they were when I was here. So that could be an enticement. But then again, the chance to play for a Super Bowl somewhere has to be in the back of his mind too, because
Absolutely. How is it? How would it not be?
yeah, he experienced that, and he would love to do it again. And for a team that's maybe one corner short of having a Super Bowl type defense, he would be a great guy to bring in. So, I don't know if the Patriots have reached out to him. I know when he was here back in June for the Brady thing, he said they have not. So we'll have to take it,
Where do you want to go next, Steve? We have a couple of different
Todd
ways
had another comment. Is he a free agent for a reason? Well,
I think it's a multi-layered thing. I think from his standpoint, maybe he just wants to miss training camp. We've heard about veterans wanting to do that for a long time. He doesn't really need to go there, and it's not that fun. It's not really what they get paid to do, but it is part of the uploading process, installment process and everything for teams. I think on the other side, I think that's going to be a situation where either a contender wants to see what they have and get the other guys reps because they know what he can bring to the table, or there will be an injury that pops up because unfortunately that's going to happen when you practice. Is you're going to get those random injuries, even though there's not a lot of contact. You get the non-contact injuries that happens, and you never know who's going to need someone down the stretch. I'd be surprised if we get to the beginning of the season and he wasn't on a roster somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Because he still played at a pretty high level last year. I know he's not the same guy he was when he was, depoy for us, but he's still playing at a high level.
Right. Well, I just wanted to bring up something really quick.
Please.
And I shouldn't be surprised. And Todd, who's been commenting, will probably agree with this. All spring long, we heard about Drake Maye, and everybody was on the same page. We have to have patience. He has tremendous physical talent. He just needs to put it all together. He's still young. He's only 21 years old. Okay. Patience. And now I saw some of the comments the other day. After 2 padded practices, they're ready to throw this kid out as a bust. And I just think that, I know Russ always complains about the media, and you and I would roll our eyes at it.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I talked to Russ offline the other day, and he said, you have no idea what the sports radio talk is like. And I was like, well, I never listened, so
I've told you this before. I tune in to not the morning show because I'm not really a big fan. Nothing really against Hardy or Touch, but I'm not a big fan. But I tune in for 15, 20 minutes a day to the midday and afternoon show just to see what the conversational piece is. And Todd, it is negative. It is negative. And I don't mind that people are sometimes pessimistic about sports because I can be like that as well. But Steve and I had a conversation. We're filming this Thursday, August 1st. We had a conversation Wednesday night. So last night. And we were kind of laughing at ourselves because we both sounded like Russ. We were like, this is freaking ridiculous. All we talked about was how we wanted Drake Maye on the Patriots. The whole media was like, draft a quarterback. Jaden Daniels or Drake Maye. If it's Jaden Daniels, he's probably going to start. If it's Drake Maye, he's probably going to have to sit. That was before he was drafted. Then after he was drafted, they were like, well, this is why they signed Jacoby Brissett, because he's not going to be ready. So we just got to work him in. There's no pressure on him. Don't start him until you feel good about the offensive line, about how you installing a new offense. And then here we are, 2 padded practices in, and And you would think this kid is the worst pick of all time. So I don't know. I feel like you can't win. This is my biggest Russ Goldman rant I've had in our 12-year history, but I couldn't. I can hear what he's saying. I can hear what he's thinking, and I feel like he's throwing it through my ears because I'm seeing this and I'm just like, what the hell? We knew what was happening. We knew this was going to be a thing. Practice, patience. He's going to be there. You see it in the throws. You just let it play out.
And granted, I mean, the people that we respect and talk to all the time, they said he's struggled. Gerard Mayo said he's struggled. But at the same time, every day you see the highlight, video reels, and he's still making big plays out there. He's throwing beautiful passes. Maybe not every time, right? But it's there because we've seen it on the tape. And, this whole patience thing, I mean, they haven't even had a preseason game yet. I mean, let the kid learn before you label him a bust. I mean, talking about the ghost of Mac Jones in Dallas, I mean, is that overreaction or what?
Oh man, I'll tell you.
But I just,
speaking of Drake Maye, Steve.
Huh?
I said speaking of Drake Maye.
Yep.
It leads my mind to go to Joe Milton. And actually, this reminds me of two different things, both Milton related, ironically. The Milton has been playing pretty well. He's still showing inconsistencies, but I'm kind of intrigued. What are your thoughts on the team? We know Brissett and May are getting a lot of run, but it seems like either Zappe or Milton are kind of alternating days on getting more reps. What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Well, I think again, they're just trying to be fair with those guys to give them an even shake.
Yep.
And I mean,
without seeing preseason, if you had to pick right now, your preference. Okay, this is Steve is Elliot Wolf in this case. Are you keeping Milton or Zappe?
I'm keeping Milton.
Okay, and why is that?
Because of the physical talent.
Yeah.
The other day he threw a ball 65 yards in the air, and it was caught, and that was, I mean, those are the type of things that you can't teach.
I called you when we were on the phone yesterday, it was either yesterday or earlier this week. Paul Perillo, who was on the show not too long ago, works for PatsFans.com, Patriots Unfiltered. He said that he thinks his arm is about as impressive as Elway's, and this is someone who's been covering the team for a long time, seen a lot of practices, a lot of games. And so I don't take that too lightly. I haven't seen Milton's arm in person. My cousin went to the University of Tennessee, lives in Nashville, goes to a lot of games, told me when the Patriots drafted him that he's like, you're going to be stunned by this guy's talent. He's erratic. He's all over the place. But he has an arm like you've never seen before, and I think we've seen that a couple times on display.
Yeah, he has the physical talent. I think they're not forcing him into anything where he's at right now, so that's why I think they'd be willing to keep him. He's obviously a project, and you never know.
Doesn't it make more sense? Doesn't it make more sense to keep him and let Zappe try to go through waivers and see if you can bring him back to the practice squad? Like in a perfect world, I think that's what makes the most sense. Is Milton was drafted in the 6th round. There's got to be some other team that's at least interested by the physical talent. Like you just said, how can you not be? So it's like, let Zappe go. Worst case scenario, he gets picked up by another team, and you get another veteran that you sign on the practice squad in case something happens to Brissett and you're not ready to throw May into the fire. Fine.
Right. And, one of the beat guys, I don't know if it was, I hate to say the wrong name, but one of the beat guys mentioned last week that he's beginning to learn a little bit more touch, that he's not thrown at 70 yards on a 5-yard cross,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing, because
Shout
that's
out to
what
Alex Barth, because that was the first time I ever heard that
it might
saying,
have
and it
been.
was
Yeah,
awesome.
it might have been Alex.
Well,
But,
that was Alex's big thing, like pre-draft.
yeah,
He was like,
yeah,
if you need Joe Milton to throw it 85 yards, I'll throw it 85 yards. If you need to throw the ball out a 5-yard crossing route, he'll throw it 85 yards.
yeah,
which I thought was hilarious, and
yeah.
honestly it makes me laugh.
Was the tweet of the draft season, I thought.
Oh yeah,
But
that was incredible.
It's encouraging to watch, these young kids develop. I like what I've seen from, Milton and May. Yeah, it's a process. They're still learning. But I also like what we've seen from the young wide receivers with Mario Douglas.
Yep.
And Kendrick Bourne.
I think Javon Baker's been balling out.
Baker,
Polk. And a lot of people have been concerned about Polk, Steve. And I'm not there. We're not at training camp, which really sucks, because I know you and I would love to be there together and watch this stuff and kind of go through it. But I think something that some people, I'm not saying everybody's saying this, I'm just saying some people are forgetting with Polk is that he was a contested catch receiver at Washington, and people are surprised he's not getting a lot of separation. But I see a lot of videos of him catching balls. He's just not a guy who's going to pull away. He's not that guy. I do think in games he'll be even more competitive. I think he will be a guy who will be a good guy. I think that when they targeted Drake Maye as their quarterback, they said, look, this guy's got all the talent, the size, the athleticism, but his ball placement is not perfect. This isn't Drew Brees. So we need to get some guys that are going to be able to go up and get the ball. Well, they did that with Polk and Baker, both guys who can go up and get balls, who win a ton of contested catches. I think Baker has been a little bit more impressive by reports in camp. And I think that you've seen in their highlights in college, both players, kind of have, succeeding at that level. And then I think when you had Josh Downs at the University of North Carolina for Drake Maye 2 years ago, you saw a guy that was a great utility weapon for him. I think that's what you're going to get in Pop Douglas. Now, of course, we've talked about this 100 times. We don't need to talk about it extensively. They need the good X receiver, or the good, like the cherry on top, the top end receiver, I think, to kind of open some things up. But they have a lot of other of those boxes checked for the receivers, in my opinion. And I'm encouraged with what I've heard about them in camp.
Yeah, good question here by Todd. He had his notes all prepared today.
Yeah.
What's the major difference in Alex Van Pelt's system compared to last year?
Oh,
well, I think
it's a total offensive system flip. I mean, you're going from the Earhart Perkins system to more of like like your Shanahan kind of scheme. The blocking is going to be totally different up front with Scott Peters leading the helm. It's going to be really run oriented, but there's going to be a lot of attacking the seams, which Drake Maye was the best quarterback in this class at throwing down the middle. And I think that's part of the reason they brought in Austin Hooper, so that if they did go with those 2 tight end packages where they want to run the ball, I think, you'll see some play action, some tight end shots kind of down the middle. To me, I just think it's a little bit more West Coast, basically. I don't know what Steve would agree or
disagree with that. Zone runs and But
and now you have guys who actually know how to install it, not just guys that we're just going to pretend they're going to be able to do it.
And that's a big difference. But I think one of the big differences is that in Van Pelt's system, they're going to run a lot of naked bootlegs with play action and take shots down the field.
Yep.
And, they have a couple of guys with some speed. And, and I know nobody wants to hear it, but Tyquan Thornton's having a solid camp so far.
Let's put a tab in that for a second, and we'll end the show with him, okay? But the other thing I would say too, just to mention on this is, and you just said it, a lot of people look at this system and they just say, oh, it's just a running scheme, it's a zone blocking scheme, they want to just run the ball. they want to take this offense wants to take shots downfield. They need to open it up. So I think that in the past couple of years, I would say the Mac Jones era, we haven't really seen them take a lot of shots down the field. They really kept him in check a lot of times. There was a couple of deep ones. Like I remember Mac's rookie year against the Chargers. He had one. He had one or two decent long balls with the Browns. Maybe one or two against the Jaguars in that blowout game. But other than that, there really weren't a ton of long, deep shots. And I really think that they're going to want to take some deeper shots here because that, like you said, Steve, it's coming off of the play action. The whole thing is making the defense – it's trying to make the defense move. And there's going to be a lot of boots. And there's a lot of boots, a lot of waggles. Like it's going to be a lot of play action stuff. And it's something that Jacoby's done plenty of times before, something Josh McDaniels had him do when he filled in against, what was that, the Texans, when he filled in like one of his earlier years. I can't remember which year it was.
Actually, I think Mac Jones's best deep ball was against Dallas with Kendrick Bourne, right after he threw a pick six.
Yeah, that's a good one. I agree. So that's, anyway, I just thought it was worth, kind of mentioning, but Tyquan Thornton, Steve, is really interesting, because we've had this conversation a lot, and just to rehash it, we know the 4 receiver locks. Like we know that the top 4 guys. We know KB, we know it's Pop, we know it's Baker, we know it's Polk. So really, it's down to 5 or 6 guys. And I was talking to Ian about this the other day, pretty extensively, and I think KJ Osborne's right in that mix. I think that Kayshon Boutte could be in that mix. I think that Jalen Reagor makes a lot of sense, especially with his special teams ability. And the forgotten guy is Tyquan. I mean, a lot of people have kind of written him off totally. And I personally, let me ask you this question. If you had to pick between Kayshon Boutte, Jalen Reagor, Tyquan Thornton, and KJ Osborne for 2, you have to pick 2 of them. For the bottom, Juju I have totally written out. I hope they just eat the money and go. There's just no point of keeping him, and it's nothing really against
everything, everyone's saying it. He just does not have.
He doesn't have his legs anymore. He just doesn't. And I don't wish him any ill will or anything. I wish him the best. I just think that there just makes no sense in any capacity to keep him on the team because I already mentioned the first 4 guys. Juju should not crack any one of those first 4 guys. So he's the 5th or the 6th guy if they keep 6. Well, he doesn't bring anything to special teams. I'd rather have Osborne and Reagor. Like I'd take those 2 guys all day long. What would you pick between those 4 guys that I mentioned?
Well,
if you had to pick 2 of them,
there's
2 spots.
I think Reagor. I mean, he can do the occasional deep post.
He's also been pretty good at camp.
And he's a very good returner. Mm-hmm. We've seen that last year. That's what he brings to the table. Osborne is a proven vet. He's always been able to catch the ball. But I'm not writing off Kayshon Boutte either. He's come on. So I don't know.
I think so. For me, I'd have to run through the numbers, but I'd probably keeping 6 because I think the bottom 2 guys will give me some depth and have a little bit more experience than the 2 rookies. So if I'm looking at like the depth chart, I'm going Kendrick Bourne and Pop, and then Baker and Polk, however you want to stack them, whatever, they're 3 and 4. So my last 2 guys, I'm like, okay, I might as well have Osborne and Reagor. They give me special teams balance, and they kind of protect me as far as some experience for the 2 rookies if they need some more time to get acclimated. I think that's how I'd stack 6 of them, I mean, Kendrick Bourne is obviously the best receiver on the team, and Pop's right. Honestly, I think Pop is right there. I mean, he's a really good player. And in a perfect world, he'd be your 3rd. He'd be like your 3rd or 4th receiver. Okay, I'm not saying he's Randy Moss, but he brings value. You saw it last year. He moves different. I mean, the player I was talking to back in March, and I've told you this off air, but he told me, he's like, Christian Gonzalez and Pop Douglas just move different than everybody else. He's like, if you're on the field, you just see them and you're just like, wow, these guys just different level, like, you know. And I've heard that from a couple of our media friends as well. So to me, I think that's really an interesting thing. I'm fascinated by the cornerback and receiver. I'm fascinated by those two things. And obviously, we have the quarterback play, okay, but then you have the receiver competition, the offensive line combination, and the cornerback depth. But those four things to me are top of the top for the preseason, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Right. And going back to, Thornton one more time, I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if the light comes on for him in year 3 and he's able to stay healthy and put that speed to use? I know that they've revised his route tree a little bit. So that's something else, the big thing for him is being able to get out there and not have any setbacks. So this coming week, is going to be a big game for him.
Yep. It's funny. I was just looking at Mike Cadlick tweeted out, Kendrick Bourne, what do you say? Buy your Tyquan Thornton stock an hour ago. And Andy Hart retweeted them and said, I'm kind of taking the cheese. And I've heard that from a couple of people. I mean, Evan Lazar's big thing has been, I'm not doing it. I'm not falling for the Tyquan Thornton thing again. But he is building. And so, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, they don't really have a player like him, on the roster. He said he put on 7 or 8 pounds of muscle this offseason. It looks like it. It looks like he's put on a little bit to his frame. And we're going back to Todd's question about how the offense is going to be different, and we're talking about them wanting to take some deep shots. Well, he's a player who obviously could play outside and take deep shots with. My thing is then, okay, who goes? Who goes? We just talked about the 6, and I'm not sure which one I would remove for him. So, I mean, maybe if I go 6, I mean, to me, I think Rager's making the team just because of the special teams thing. I mean, that just feels like, to me, it's right there. I know they signed Osborne. I think it could be a mix between Osborne and Thornton. Maybe it's down to the two of them. I don't know, but I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, and these next 3 preseason games will tell us where they're at, because I believe. I mean, I think it's wide open right now. I don't think anybody's, penciled in right now.
Yep.
So they're going to let the chips fall. I think for a guy like Thornton, it's staying healthy, right up until week 1, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, we'll absolutely. See. I mean, that's the name of the game for him. Is he has to do everything in his power this camp and this offseason and going into the preseason is staying healthy and performing. And so far, he's done that. And I think that it could save his roster spot. Maybe they try to squeak him onto the practice squad, if not. But, I don't know how that would fly. But anyway, folks, we have to wrap up. Again, we're recording this August 1st at right now it's about 2 p.m. Eastern time. And I'm not sure when Russell's going to be able to post the show. I assume it will be posted on the 2nd. But the Patriots' first preseason game is a 1 week from today. Really excited about it. Steve and I will have to look at our schedules, but we'll, within 24 hours or so after the game, we will definitely have a recap on the first game. I'd like to do maybe even a small preview if we can squeeze it in. So we'll see if we can get a show posted before then, but Steve and I will talk about that off air. But I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Please, again, subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high on the podcast rankings so the Patriots fans can find us. I want to thank everyone that watched us live. I want to thank Todd for chiming in. Always brings his game, and I appreciate it. Appreciate the contributions. And for Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. We will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.